What if I told you that World War III didn't just start, but it actually kicked off like 2 years ago? And I'm not talking about some wild tinfoil hat prediction for the future. I am talking about right now, today, at this very second. Look, I know you see the title of this video. WW3 is already here. You just don't see it yet. And I know exactly what you're thinking. You are probably thinking I'm just throwing out some crazy clickbait to game the algorithm and get views. But hear me out, because I'm completely serious. If you are sitting around waiting for some official declaration of war on the evening news, you are already behind the curve. If you're waiting for the air raid sirens to go off, or for some politician in a fancy suit to stand behind a podium and formally announce that the world is at war, you're looking for signs from a century that has already passed. Like, you are completely missing what's going on right in front of your eyes. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why I think the next 12 to 24 months are absolutely critical for your personal freedom and your financial survival. So do yourself a favor, stick around, grab a coffee, and let's get into it. The media feeds us these constant, terrifying images of classic kinetic battles. You know exactly what I mean. The trenches, the artillery fire, the tanks rolling through ruined cities. And yeah, obviously that stuff is happening in certain parts of the world right now, and it is absolutely horrible. I am not minimizing that at all. But here is the thing you have to understand. That is the distraction. That physical violence is the kinetic stuff that gets high ratings on the evening news because it looks good on a screen. But the real World War III, the one that is actively reshaping the entire globe and directly targeting your everyday way of life, is happening in complete silence. It is happening in cyberspace, and it is happening in the global economy. Look, I grew up playing real-time strategy games, StarCraft, Command and Conquer, all that good stuff. Anyone who has ever played those games competitively knows how a massive conflict actually works. Before the massive map-clearing final battle, there's always a huge, prolonged phase of resource accumulation and map control. You don't just take your units and blindly rush across the map in the first 5 minutes. That's how you lose. Instead, you build up your economy. You silently choke off your opponent's access to resources. You scout their base to find their weak points, and you disrupt their supply lines before a single shot is fired. That is exactly 100% what we are living through right now on a geopolitical scale. We are currently in the late-game resource accumulation and disruption phase of a global conflict. The politicians get on TV looking calm and collected and tell us they have the situation under control. They tell us they are managing the escalation and keeping us safe. Let me be straight with you. That is complete BS. The processes that have been set in motion over the last couple of years are already irreversible. The dominoes are falling, and they are just pretending they meant to knock them over. Let's look at the facts, because I don't want to just sit here and give you my feelings or some paranoid rant. I want to look at the actual data. Fact number one, let's talk about military budgets. Look at what is happening with NATO right now. For decades, literally years and years, the United States was begging European countries to just meet their basic 2% GDP requirement for defense spending. And for years, they basically laughed it off and wouldn't do it. They were comfortable. They thought history was over. But look at the numbers today. NATO military budgets have spiked by over 10% across the board just recently. You have countries like Germany, who were strictly pacifist and relied on cheap foreign energy for decades, suddenly rewriting their constitution to dump 100 billion euros into rearming their military. You have Poland buying up thousands of tanks and building the largest land army in Europe. You don't dump hundreds of billions of dollars into military hardware just for fun. You don't buy that much fire insurance when your house is perfectly fine. You buy it because you smell smoke. And right now, the global elite absolutely smell smoke. Now let's pivot and talk about the digital front line, because this is where the real silent war is happening. According to recent cybersecurity data, the number of cyber attacks on U.S. government structures, critical infrastructure, and major corporations has literally tripled since 2022. Let that sink in for a second. tripled. We aren't talking about some random script kiddies sitting in a basement trying to steal your Netflix password. We are talking about highly sophisticated state-sponsored attacks funded by foreign intelligence agencies. These hackers are actively probing our power grids. They are testing the firewalls on our water treatment facilities. They are looking for vulnerabilities in our banking and financial systems. This is the modern equivalent of flying spy planes over enemy territory. But instead of just taking photographs, they are planting logic bombs and digital backdoors. Think about it. If a foreign country sent a physical team of commandos to blow up a power substation in Ohio, we would immediately call it an act of war. The public would demand retaliation, but because they do it with a few lines of code from 5,000 miles away, the media just calls it a cyber incident. And we all go back to scrolling on our phones. It's a joke. It is warfare, plain and simple. And then there's the money. Follow the money, guys. It always tells the truth, even when the politicians are lying. Look at what China is doing right now behind the scenes. China has been buying up physical gold at record-breaking, unprecedented paces. The People's Bank of China has been quietly dumping billions of dollars in U.S. treasuries and aggressively hoarding physical gold for months on end. Ask yourself why. Why do you do that? You do that when you are preparing your economy for massive, crippling sanctions. You do that when you want to insulate your own currency from the U.S. dollar system. We saw Russia do the exact same thing right before things popped off in Eastern Europe. They de-dollarized their reserves to survive the financial hit. China is watching all of this. They are learning from it, and they are preparing. They are stockpiling resources, not just gold, but food reserves, energy supplies, and critical rare earth minerals. They are fortifying their economic base for a protracted global conflict. Here is what the mainstream media completely misses, or maybe they just don't want you to know because it would cause a panic. The entire nature of war has fundamentally changed. As a society, we are stuck in this 20th century mindset where war means storming a beach or fighting in a jungle. We think of war as a purely physical, bloody thing. But in the 21st century, destroying a country's economy from the inside out is infinitely more effective and way less politically costly than dropping bombs on their cities. Honestly, why would you drop a nuke when you can just crash the enemy's power grid in the middle of a freezing winter? Why would you send an invading army of 1 million men when you can launch a coordinated cyber attack that freezes the entire banking system, wipes out digital property records, and causes massive societal panic in a matter of hours? That's what they are not telling you. The front lines are no longer in some distant desert. The front lines are the server farms in Virginia, the undersea internet cables in the Pacific, the financial clearinghouses in New York, and the global supply chains that bring food to your local grocery store. Everyone thinks we are living in this tense peace, right? Like, sure, there are conflicts over there in other countries, but we are perfectly safe at home. No, we're not. We are already taking casualties in this war. They just look completely different than what we are used to. When inflation spikes out of nowhere because global supply chains are being intentionally weaponized, that is an economic casualty. You are paying for the war at the grocery store. When your personal data gets leaked in a massive corporate breach that was actually a state-sponsored data harvesting operation, you are a casualty of this shadow war. The politicians absolutely do not want to admit this. Admitting it means they have to actually do something about it. Admitting we are already in the early phases of World War III means admitting that all their diplomatic efforts and international institutions have completely failed. It means admitting that the globalized system they built over the last 30 years is incredibly fragile. So what do? They use sanitized bureaucratic language. They call it strategic competition or asymmetric hybrid threats. It's all just corporate speak to avoid saying the word war out loud. Here's my honest take on this whole situation. I think what's really going on is that the major global powers have realized that a direct kinetic war between nuclear-armed states is basically suicide. Nobody wants to rule over a pile of radioactive ash. The elites want to maintain their wealth and power, and you can't do that if the world ends. But at the same time, everybody wants to carve up the global pie. Everybody wants to be the one calling the shots in this new multipolar world order that is forming, So how do you defeat your enemy without triggering a nuclear holocaust? It's simple. You bleed them to death slowly. You attack their economy relentlessly. You fund endless proxy wars to drain their military stockpiles and exhaust their industrial base. You use sophisticated information warfare and algorithmic manipulation to divide their population, make them hate each other, and destroy their social fabric from within. Does any of that sound familiar? Because that is exactly what we are watching happen in real time right now. Honestly, if you think war is only about tanks crossing borders, you are stuck in the 20th century. We are in the middle of a global realignment, and it is getting nasty. Now, look, I could be wrong, but let's break down where this actually goes from here. I see three main scenarios playing out over the next few years, and none of them are exactly a walk in the park. Let's start with the best case scenario. The absolute best case, in my opinion, is that we manage to avoid direct military confrontation and settle into what I call Cold War 2.0. In this scenario, the global economy officially and permanently fractures into two distinct separate blocks. Yeah, you have the Western Bloc led by the US and Europe, and the Eastern Bloc led by China, Russia, and the expanding BRICS nations. If this happens, we basically just stop trading with each other. Technology ecosystems completely split. The internet literally gets divided into a Western internet and a tightly controlled Eastern splinternet. It means massive economic pain for everyone in the short term. We will see huge inflation as we have to completely rebuild our supply chains locally and manufacture things at home again. But at the very least, the missiles stay in their silos, and millions of people don't die in physical combat. Honestly, I would love this scenario compared to the alternatives. It has maybe a 30% probability of happening smoothly, but it requires a lot of cool heads prevailing, which is rare these days. Now, let's talk about the worst case scenario. This is the fucked up one. This is what actually keeps me up at night. And I don't think the worst case is a deliberate decision by some evil dictator to launch nukes. I don't think any leader is actually crazy enough to just push the button on purpose, knowing it means their own destruction. The worst case is an accidental nuclear escalation triggered by a system glitch or a massive cyber attack gone wrong. Think about it for a second. We just talked about how these countries are constantly probing each other's digital infrastructure. What happens when a highly aggressive piece of malware accidentally infects an early warning radar system? What happens if an AI-driven defense system misinterprets a massive targeted cyber attack on a national communications grid as the precursor to a nuclear strike? If the system goes dark, the AI might automatically trigger a retaliatory launch protocol. In an environment where everyone is this paranoid, where hypersonic missiles mean response times are measured in single-digit minutes, a single false alarm or a rogue line of code could literally end human civilization. That's the terrifying reality of mixing unregulated cyber warfare with Cold War-era nuclear deterrence. But let's be realistic here. What is the most likely scenario? What is the actual path we are walking down right now? My prediction is that we aren't going to get a clean, stable Cold War, and we probably won't get a sudden nuclear apocalypse. What we are going to get is a grueling, permanent state of low-level, high-impact conflict. I'm talking about a never-ending series of devastating proxy wars all over the globe. The big powers will just keep funding smaller countries, rebel groups, and private military contractors to fight each other in places like Africa, the Middle East, and South America. They will use these zones to secure resources, test new drone technologies, and drain the enemy's treasury. Alongside this, we will see a massive, undeniable escalation in daily cyber terrorism. I'm talking about ransomware attacks that shut down major hospitals for weeks, mysterious fires at critical food processing plants, temporary but widespread power grid failures in major cities. It will be a constant low-grade buzzing of chaos that slowly but surely degrades our overall quality of life. It's the classic frog in the boiling pot scenario, right? We won't even realize how bad it has gotten because it will happen incrementally, month by month, crisis by crisis. I'd say this scenario has a solid 60 to 70% chance of being our reality for the next decade. So what does this actually mean for you? Why does any of this matter to the average person who is just trying to pay their rent, take care of their family, and live a normal life? It matters because this invisible world war directly impacts your wallet, your access to basic daily resources, and your personal security. You think inflation is bad right now? You think housing and groceries are too expensive? Wait until a major state-sponsored cyber attack hits a key shipping port on the West Coast and completely freezes logistics for a month. Wait until rare earth mineral exports from Asia are completely cut off as a retaliatory sanction, making the price of every single piece of electronics from your smartphone to your car parts skyrocket overnight. Your savings are under attack right now through the silent devaluation of currency. Inflation isn't just an economic accident. In this environment, it is a hidden tax to fund this shadow war. You have to take the rose-colored glasses off, man. You have to stop relying on the mainstream news to tell you when it is time to start worrying, because I promise you, by the time the talking heads on TV tell you to panic, the grocery store shelves will already be completely empty. You need to start analyzing these geopolitical shifts critically. When you read a headline, ask yourself, how does a conflict over a tiny microchip factory halfway across the world affect my job here at home? Because in a hyper-connected global economy, it absolutely does. It is time to seriously diversify your assets. Look, I'm not a financial advisor, so do your own research on this, but leaving all your wealth sitting in cash in a traditional bank while the entire global financial system is being actively weaponized is a very risky game. Look into tangible assets, look into things that hold value outside of the digital banking system, and more importantly, look into skills. Develop skills that make you indispensable regardless of what the economic climate looks like. If the digital world goes down, what physical, real-world value can you provide? And on a purely practical level, you need to prepare for turbulence. I am not saying you need to go out tomorrow, buy a plot of land, build an underground bunker, and live off freeze-dried food for the rest of your life. But having a basic backup plan isn't crazy anymore. It is literally just common sense. Do you have some extra food and purified water in your house if the power grid goes down for a week? Do you have a physical way to heat your home if the natural gas lines get shut off due to a pipeline hack? Do you have actual physical hard cash on hand if the ATM networks and credit card processors are frozen by a cyber incident? These aren't doomsday prepper fantasies anymore, guys. These are highly probable, realistic scenarios given the current state of offensive cyber capabilities. We are dealing with unprecedented digital vulnerabilities, and nobody is coming to save you if the screens go dark. You have to be your own first responder. Look, I know this is incredibly heavy stuff. I know it's a lot to process. It is so much easier to just tune it all out, boot up a video game, watch some meaningless entertainment on Netflix and pretend everything is fine. But ignoring reality has never protected anyone from it. You know, the global game board is already set. The pieces are already moving. And the first shots were fired years ago in the digital realm. We are in it, whether we like it or not. That is my honest take on this whole mess. I could be completely wrong about the timeline. I honestly, truly hope I am wrong and that things cool down. But this is exactly what the data, the military movements, the defense budgets, and the macroeconomic indicators are screaming at me. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Am I missing something huge here? Am I just being too paranoid, or do you see the exact same patterns that I'm seeing? Drop your thoughts below. I read as many as I can. If you appreciate the real talk, the no BS approach to what's actually happening in the world, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone in your life who needs a serious wake-up call before things get worse. Stay smart, stay prepared, keep your eyes open, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.